Bienvenidos, Ushamanid, and welcome Anne Arundel Community College learners from the CTS-130 Section 402 course from the spring 2021 semester. This is the Cisco Networking Academy's Introduction to Networks version 7 course curriculum, and in this supplemental activity to that curriculum, IP assignment number 2, we're going to take a look at identifying IPv4 address components. And again, we're going to be breaking this into a series of 4 videos, each video focused on one part of IP assignment number 2. In this video, we're going to be looking at the network portion of the address, and we're going to be challenged in the quiz here to identify what the network portion of the address is. And so for the first 10 questions here, 1 through 10, that'll be this video. We'll look at the network portion and see if we can identify what that is. Now, in order for us to make that identification, we need to understand or possibly revisit the address classes we talked about earlier. And I will draw the address classes over here. So if you remember, we had the Class A addresses. Now, the Class A addresses are also using a classful boundary, which is referred to in CIDR notation as a /8. In other words, the first 8 bits of the first octet are representative of the network. And then the last 24 bits, which I won't draw out here, but know that we've got 8 more bits here, and 8 more bits here, and 8 more bits here. These last 24 bits represent the host portion of the address. And so we identify the class of the address, and if we're dealing with a classful boundary, which is what we're talking about here, then we can easily identify the network portion of the address. And so the Class A addresses, and remember, class is based on the value found in the first octet and only the first octet. And so if we were to say Class A addresses, we would say 1 to 126. Now, you might hear, again, to repeat, either 0 to 127, you may hear 1 to 127, and it just depends on whether you're referencing addresses that are actually usable as opposed to including 0, the range from 0, the quad zeros to 0.255, 255, 255, which are not used, and then the 127 localhost address range, which again is reserved, not used for public routing consumption, right? So 1 to 126, that's our Class A. Then we have the Class B addresses, and Class B was 128 all the way up to 191. And we would say that a classful mask for a Class B address is a /16, where the first 16 bits or the first 2 octets are used to represent the network portion of the address. And then we have Class C, and our Class Cs are 192 to 223. And for Class C addresses like a 192.168.1, we would say that that is a /24. Now, these are typically the easiest of the addresses with which to work, and we'll see a number of examples of those as we make our way through the quiz here. But again, with a Class C, what we're saying is the first 24 bits of the dotted decimal IP address value represents the network portion of the address. And then we have our Class D addresses, which range from 224, and these are also commonly referred to as multicast addresses. And when we get into the enterprise network course, where we're dealing with OSPF, we'll be learning about 2 very interesting multicast addresses used by OSPF, which would be 224.0.0.5, which is your all OSPF speaking router multicast address, and 224.0.0.6, which is the all DR and BDR multicast address for OSPF. And again, those addresses are used to communicate from one OSPF speaker to one or more other OSPF speakers. And so that's our Class D. And then I don't believe we have any Class E's, but I'll put it up here just for completeness sake, is the Class E's range from, oops, that's a terrible 2 there. Let's redraw that again. From 240 to 254. Now remember, the 255s, those are not, oops, sorry, I went 254. I was getting ready to say 255. The 255s are not used. Just like the zeros aren't used, the 255s are not used for publicly routable IPs. All right, so there's the ranges we're dealing with. Let's go ahead and now take a look over here at these questions. So now these 10 questions become very, very easy to deal with because we look at the value in the first octet, we come over to our trusty chart, and I say 200 falls within which range? Well, it falls within the Class C, meaning the first 3 octets are representative of the network portion of the address. The last octet is the host portion. So the network portion would be 200.15.76. Question number 2. 139.254. Well, we take a look over here. What range does 139 fall into? Well, it falls into our Class B range. The first 16 bits in a classful scenario would be representative of the network portion. The last 16 bits represent the host portion of the address. And so the correct answer here would be 139.250. That is the network portion of the address. We take a look at 195, and this is pretty easy because we know it's right after 192. And so that's a Class C, meaning the first 24 bits, the first 3 octets of the address represent the network portion. And so our correct answer here is 195.80.45. So now let's go ahead and scroll down a bit here, and we'll pull up questions 4 through. See how close we can get here. And we'll sort of leave that there. Let's see if I was to pull back some of the writing that we just did. See how far back we can go, and hopefully we can clean up. All right, well, we'll figure out what we're going to do here with this one once we get to answering that question. So question number 4 is 100 is the first value. Well, 100 falls within which range? It falls within our Class A range. And so the network portion of the address is 100. And that would be your answer. The last 24 bits represent the host portion of the address. Now we get down here to question number 5, 25. Well, we know that's definitely a low first value or low value in the first octet. And so that would be a Class A. And so I know I've got it all circled here, but it's because I can't erase it without erasing our chart over here. So we'll leave it where it's at. And just know that 25, the first 8 bits, that is our answer. That's the network portion is just 25 because it's a Class A address. And then we have 202, and that falls within our Class C address range. So a /24, right? And that slash number notation, that is the classless interdomain routing notation, or as it's commonly referred to, CIDR, classless interdomain routing notation, CIDR notation. So we say that a Class C, or an address with 24 bits representing the subnet mask, that the /24, it is the first 3 octets that represent the network portion. The last octet represents the host portion. And then we get down to 181, and that falls within our Class B range, meaning the first 2 octets, or the first 16 bits, represent the network portion of the address. So let me go ahead and pull some of that writing back here, and then we're going to scroll down. Whoops, and we're pulling back the cider notation. And so we did number 7. So now we'll answer 8, 9, and 10. And I'll tell you what, let's do this without our helper sheet. And it shouldn't be that difficult. So 11, we know that that's going to be a class A because it's a very low number. And so the network portion is 11. The last 24 bits represent the host portion of the address. Now, 215 is going to require us to think a little bit, but if we know that the Class C range of 192 to 223 is for Class C addresses, when we're talking about classful boundaries, then we know that the first 24 bits represent the network portion. The last 8 bits represent the host portion. So the network portion is 215.255.167. What about question 10? We've got this 172, and 172 is one of those well-known RFC 1918 ranges, or the 172.16 that is. But we do know that 172 would be a Class B, and the first 16 bits, the first 2 octets, represent the network portion of the address. So our answer would be 172.15. And that is going to do it for this video in identifying the network portion of the address. Again, this activity is walking us up to subnetting and understanding what's going to happen when we start to borrow host bits in order to create more networks or subnets. So we're going to take one classful mask like a /8 or a /16 or a /24, and we're going to borrow from the host bits in order to create many subnets or smaller networks, if you will. All right, well, let's clear the screen here. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask, and that is going to do it for this activity on identifying the IPv4 network portion of an address. That's it, and I hope to see you in the next video.